of deceit. Telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Monday, the 20th of July, year of our Lord 2026. Well, today we're going to take a look at the Iran restart. We're going to take a look at the people behind the campaign to restart the war. We're also going to take a look at some new developments in this SIDS case. Folks, this is very important. This is something that is vital, and we have a Second Circuit Court has violated a precedent of the Supreme Court in one of the most ignorant, asinine court decisions I've ever seen in my life. They're coming after the Amish and denying them the religious liberty to not have vaccines and to not homeschool. Imagine that. They are the control group for this vaccine mania. They have to shut that down, just like they have to shut down this poor woman whose children were killed by the pharmaceutical companies, now denying her bail, first setting it at $2 million, but now denying her bail altogether. We'll be right back. Well, we knew that they would get their war back. They had a full court press from all of the Zionist press, Mark Levin and the rest of them. And we know who owns and controls Trump. And isn't it amazing that as this is all happening, we're being dragged into this quagmire. The world is being drawn into a global depression because, folks, this is much more serious at this point in terms of the oil supply. If you don't care about human life, the oil supply, at least. What about your money? What about your dollars? Do you care about that? This is something that they have been able to coast somewhat on the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and other things like that, as well as the amount of oil that was already in transit on the ocean. Those two sources are pretty much dried up at this point. That's why we said when Trump did the ceasefire, we said, well, it's not going to be permanent because he has to obey his masters in Israel for this war, and they're the ones who are pushing this. But it was really to try to rebolster, to buy some more time and to get through the summer. But now it's back. And the question is, as we keep seeing throughout the press, that's article after article after article. Well, this is Trump's red line. They killed some American troops. Well, it's obviously not a red line for Donald Trump. And it's not a red line for him because of assassination threats from Iran. He didn't just threaten to assassinate Iranian leaders, he did it. And we have this massive campaign talking about how horrible China is because they tried to influence our elections. What about the Israel influence on our elections? What about the Israeli influence on our Congress? What difference does it make if some foreign country tries to influence the voters when we've got another foreign country that owns our Congress? And so this is, you talk about AIPAC. I guess, what does that stand for? American Israelis who pay all congressmen? Is that what that stands for? Because they're all on the take, except for one or two. And they're pushing them out. They got Marjorie Taylor Greene to leave. They defeated Thomas Massie with millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. So the question is, U.S. launches strike after Iranian attack kills 2 American soldiers. This is the way the New York Times put it. No, so Iran started this, did they? Is that right? No, we started it, New York Times. Come on, let's get real about this. Who started this war? Who restarted this war? Who is it that is ultimately responsible for this? Certainly, Trump is responsible. And as we see more American troops dying, it started out with 2. Now they're up to 4. They'll gradually increase this. They don't want to have a big headline of a large number of troops. If you look at the missiles that came in at that base, truly looked devastating. I can't imagine that there'd only be 4 people killed and all of that. And the question is why? And we look at where it hit. In Jordan, why'd they have a base in Jordan? Well, they pulled it back because they thought it'd be safer in Jordan. Well, actually, it wasn't. And it wasn't limited just to Jordan. The American press and the Pentagon is trying to talk only about that, and yet there was also an American military base. I think it was in Qatar. We'll get to that in a moment. So they hit 2 American bases. So our response is to destroy civilian infrastructure. That's a war crime. That's terrorism. Just like starting a war when you haven't been attacked is a war crime. That is terrorism. What is terrorism by legal definition? Well, that's using violence or the threat of violence to achieve your political means. And you're using that, you're threatening to use that against individuals or against entire countries or against political systems or ethnic groups or whatever. We check all of those boxes, don't we? Between the U.S. and Israel. So this was the 8th straight night of strikes. And so the previous night, Trump had killed another 8 Iranians. But when they reported this, the Pentagon was saying that only 2 Americans were killed. That is not true. And who did they die for? Who did they die for? And what cause? Just like Obama, our peace president, this peace president is really good at killing, isn't he? The State Department issued a worldwide travel warning. There we go, because we're making the world safe for democracy? No. We're making the world unsafe. And we overthrew the Iranian democracy back in 1953, and we installed a tyrant, a king, a dictator with a ruthless secret police that we trained. The Iranian attack that killed 2 U.S. soldiers and left 1 service member missing on Friday was the 4th in 5 days on U.S. forces in Jordan. All right, let's think about that. So Iran attacked 4 times in 5 days. The U.S. attacked 8 times in 8 days. Who is the aggressor here? Who is ramping this up? The flurry of attacks and the losses that they have caused are a sign that Iranian forces not only still have ample missile stocks, but have also become more adept at evading U.S. air defenses, said U.S. officials who were speaking on condition of anonymity to discuss operational matters. Well, I think we all saw that, didn't we? But wasn't it back in March that Trump said, don't worry, we had everything. We had Trump and War Pete telling us that they had no more Navy, no more Air Force, no more missiles really to speak of. And yet, even as they're speaking those lies, we see that none of that is true. None of it is true. They're sugarcoating the casualties. They're sugarcoating the destruction. They're trying to delay the reporting of that. The pictures of the devastation that was done to a military base by the Iranian retaliation, where they took out the radar installations that were really the eyes of the missile defense system, that was withheld for months. And so there was an attack on Jordan and in another country. Again, the casualties have now gone up to 4 from the originally reported 2. So when you look at Fortune magazine, here's another headline. Iran just crossed Trump's red line. Red line. Yeah, he's got a red line. He's got rules. He's got boundaries that you shall not cross over. Are there any boundaries for Trump? No, he's bragged about the fact that he can do anything he pleases. This is a rules-based world order, is it? Whose rules? Who obeys those rules? Certainly not the people making them. He doesn't have any red lines that he has to stay within. He gets a free pass to kill whoever he pleases, whenever he pleases. And nobody should even talk about trying to do the same thing in response. I mean, consider the fact that in his first administration, he was proud of the fact and boasted about the fact that he killed their leading general, assassinated him, typical of Zionists, and Trump is a Zionist. And yet, if they put up, and they did put up, posters showing his family in caskets, not just Trump, but his wife, Melania, all the kids, so forth. You put that up, that is considered to be beyond the pale. Why do we have this double standard? And certainly, we need to understand that there is no justice in any war if we target civilians, if we start it and we initiate it. I mean, even on October the 7th, the Israelis went to great pains to try to explain, and there's a lot of doubt as to whether or not it was actually organic in terms of the Hamas attacks. Did they stand down? Did they allow it? Did they exacerbate it? Did they kill their own people? You know, there's a lot of people who say yes to all of those. And yet it was very important for the narrative, wasn't it? Because they understood that it would not be justified to attack Gaza if they hadn't attacked first. And they're still hanging on to that aspect of it. But even if that were true, there's a second aspect of this. And that is, if you're going to target civilians, and if you're going to do it punitively, not as an effort to stop aggression, not as an effort to get the people who committed an aggression, if you target civilian populations, that is unjust. And so the U.S. military has now reinstated a naval blockade. And so Israel demanded it. Bibi, Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro, they demanded it. So now you can look at the global consequences of what's going to happen to this, but also the consequences throughout the Middle East. It's really starting to ramp up, and Iran has had measured retaliation. That has been mistaken, I think, for weakness. I don't think that's the case. I think that they have weapons that they have restrained from using. We keep seeing this over and over again, despite the bragging and the boasting from Trump and War Peace, which I think is disgusting. Even if this were a justified war, even if they had been the aggressors and they were attacking us, it is not called for to gloat about the destruction and the death that you're raining down on people. That is disgusting, even if it was justified. But it's not justified. This entire administration has been committing one war crime after another. They began in Venezuela, attacking non-combatant ships, killing the people on them. Even in the first instance, circling back and executing people who are shipwrecked. That is a war crime. No wonder they want to get rid of the International Criminal Court, because they're next on the list. They could at least get an indictment against them, even if there's no punishment. When asked for a comment about whether the U.S. would return to an all-out war, the White House only responded with a statement from Central Command announcing the casualties. Oil prices have jumped as fighting has intensified in recent days. More war will deliver another shock to global energy markets. And as I said from the very beginning, what happened to the people that were alive in 1973? Did they not realize what happened to the economy in response to a small, limited embargo? The OPEC oil embargo was limited only to the United States. And what we were getting from the Middle East in terms of imports was a tiny fraction of the global oil that has been disrupted throughout all of this. This appears to be Donald Trump's purpose for being in office. I think they put him in both in 2020 and especially at this point in time to disrupt the global economy. Look at what he's done with tariffs. Look at the enemies that he's made. Look at the taxes that he's put on our backs. I mean, this guy is a hardcore Democrat, lying to us the entire time, telling us somebody else is going to pay the tax when we're going to pay the tax, playing the envy game to try to put taxes on us. This is a standard Democrat tactic. I've seen it all my life. Iran's supreme leader has warned of unforgettable lessons if the U.S. keeps attacking, has called Trump's signature on any treaty or memorandum worthless and invalid. Well, that's true. So is his word, as a matter of fact. The collapse of even this minimal understanding could remove the last barrier between episodic confrontation and a forever war. So the New York Times op-ed piece. Where's Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin now? All these people gloating about, see, I said it wasn't going to be a quagmire. And then when you have an opportunity to end the war, it's these same people saying it's not going to be a forever war that are coming back and demanding that we keep it going. The same people, Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin. It's just so incredibly corrupt.
It's not going to be a forever war unless I have something to say about it.
That's right. So Trump killed 8 Iranian soldiers the day before. What impact do you think that had on the American people? Wrote Daniel Davis on X. He said, I know we're ignorant, but just as a public service, Trump killed 8 Iranian soldiers the day before. So that's not a red line, is it? So it's brought the official total, we don't know, because this is the game that they play. And they would have every incentive to lie to us about casualties, because the whole game that they play is the same one we've seen played out in Vietnam. Well, yeah, we had a lot of soldiers who were killed, but we killed more of them. Does that make you feel better? Look at the number of bombs we dropped on them. Does that make you feel better? Does that win the war? No. The quantity of bombs dropped are irrelevant. Absolutely irrelevant. But that's the metric on which War Pete boasts. Who took this country to war against all advice and with no rational plan for succeeding? Well, that was Trump. And it was also immoral. Again, we will not debate war, and we forgot why war was debated. And we have embraced the folly of one person having the power to send us to war. King in spades, he is king. Caesar, right? And so now you've got a retired Air Force Brigadier General, John Teichert, goes on with Fox, and he says that he thinks that the Iranians have finally crossed Trump's, quote, threshold of patience. Seriously?
That's what Trump is known for, being a patient man.
Yeah. The most impetuous, capricious person who has ever been president in the United States. And we're told that he had patience. I don't think he had patience when he attacked as we were having peace talks with him.
If they had called him a mercurial, temperamental, childish, petulant fool.
That's right. That's right. So I say, tacos, not Trump always chickens out. It's Trump is always arbitrary and capricious in his orders and everything else that he does. So again, as you look at this, it's characterized by Zero Hedge headline as a tit-for-tat spiral towards broader conflict. And again, we go back as Lance and I were talking about when Travis was in Texas, we were talking about the prisoner dilemma and the idea that tit-for-tat isn't the way to stop conflicts. You know, they war gamed this because of the Cold War. And so they did all these different simulations. And so if you retaliate every time somebody does something, no, tit for tat with some forgiveness is the way that you finally get out of this downward spiral.
It reminds me of that Russian officer who stopped the nuclear world war by just saying, no, I don't think so. There was a, there was a glitch. And it looked like the nukes were coming in, and he was within his powers to fire the nukes back because he was in charge of that. And he just said, no, I'm not going to doom the world.
Yeah.
I think it's a glitch, but even if it's not, I don't want to destroy the world.
Well, you won't get that from AI. AI will probably initiate it. So Trump has struck Qasem Island, if that's how that's pronounced, and 3 Iranian cities. Tehran has retaliated with drone and missile attacks targeting U.S. bases and critical infrastructure in Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain. Ben-Gvir, meanwhile, the Israeli security cabinet minister, the sadistic SOB who runs the prisons and boasts about torturing and raping kids. This is amazing. It told his listeners on Israeli radio that he hoped that Trump would strike Iran hard. Yeah, maybe we could send in the crocodiles. That's what he's putting crocodiles in a moat around their prison. And even the Israelis are saying, this is insane. It's over the top. It's just performative sadism is really what it is. The Kuwaiti Ministry of Electricity warned that its power and desalination plants have come under attack for the second straight day by Iranian projectiles. There we go. If we destroy the oil-producing facilities, if we destroy their water, then that plays into the bigger plan for Israel. That is exactly what they want. Trump at 6 p.m. says, we'll destroy Iran's infrastructure. We'll make it hell. At 7 p.m., an hour later, the Iranian Prime Minister, Araghchi, said, we've already struck Kuwaiti desalination plant in response. Hit us again, and the whole Middle East loses drinking water. He said, don't mistake our restraint for weakness. As a matter of fact, they threatened full-scale offensive. They said no political border will be safe if U.S. airstrikes don't stop. Now, most people are looking at that and saying, well, they're threatening the entire Middle East. Well, they've done that before. This might also mean retaliations within the United States. Look, we can't protect our border from unarmed migrants coming across in massive numbers. If we have such weak border defenses that we can't stop that, what's going to stop the drug cartels, who, by the way, Trump has also gone into a hot war, a shooting war, kinetic war with them? That's what they want. You know, the UN drug war, and it is a UN drug war. It's not Richard Nixon's drug war. Richard Nixon just signed his UN agenda homework and turned it in and called it his drug war. But the drug war came from the United Nations. They created the four different schedules, and they put the various drugs in those 4 schedules. So it's a UN agenda enacted by Richard Nixon. It has failed to address drug addiction for over 50 years. I think we're now at 55 years for the drug. I think it started in 71. And so it is an absolute failure. Prohibition always is a failure. Alcohol prohibition was a failure, but at least they honored the Constitution by giving themselves a legal authority by amending the Constitution. There is no constitutional authority for this as well. So it really is a war on the Constitution. And it is not effective as a war on drugs. But now he's taking it to a hot war after having lost the prohibition. And if he's going to take it to a hot war, they've already found some suicide drones that are flyable with the fiber optics lines. This prevents the jamming of drones by EMF. And this is exactly one of the worst threats that you could have. This is what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. And there really is no defense against it. We have a defenseless border, and we are creating enemies everywhere. Donald Trump will have American blood on his hands, not just the soldiers that he sent to fight and die for Israel, but he will have blood on his hands from American civilians. But you better believe that when it happens, whether it is real, whether it's coming from Iran, or whether it is a false flag attack from the U.S. and Israel against American citizens, it will be the cause for war, and the media will get everybody pumped up into a frenzy, and it'll be full on at that point. If the U.S. strikes continue for several more days, we will move into a phase of full-scale offensive operations, said Iran. Iran will no longer limit itself to retaliatory, like-for-like responses, what we call tit-for-tat, and no political border will be safe. Again, we can't defend our own border against immigrants, can we? How are you going to defeat it against a concerted enemy, especially the drug cartels who know how to get through the border very easily? Iran escalating in its strikes, trying to target 2 places in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia had not been hit up until now. They were not successful in the Saudi Arabian attacks, but they were successful in hitting U.S. military bases in 2 different countries. It appears the Iranians are trying to strike an air base in Prince Sultan Air Base, where U.S. military has, until very recently at least, had military operations out of it. Now, why is it that we don't have military operations there now? Well, the Saudis did not want to be a part of this war. You know, the entire petrodollar was predicated on a defense agreement. They don't want the U.S. defense, and they don't want the U.S. petrodollars. And you need to ask yourself, when we look at all this, and this war affects gold. So people say, well, it looks like gold's going to go down some more. Bank of America is saying, yeah, it is probably going to drop a little bit more, but just average the price down. Just treat it as dollar cost averaging, because all of the fundamentals are still there, and even stronger. As Tony Arterburn at Wise Wolf Gold always talks, and I talked about it last Thursday. All of the fundamentals that caused the huge run-up in gold are there and even more intense now. And so there's absolutely nothing that has changed except for the short-term response to this. As you got a lot of countries, even Russia, the central bank is having to sell gold because of the issues with war, the cost of war, and other things like that. But China has been making massive accumulations even faster than they did in the initial run-up. And it's a record that 45% of central banks are going to be increasing their supply of gold. What do they know? Well, they know what the fundamentals are. And by the way, if you want to do something to protect your wealth, go to David Knight Gold. That'll take you to Tony Arterburn, and you can start to dollar cost average. He has a great service that he set up, even for small amounts, even down to $50 a month. You can sign up for Wolfpack, and you can get gold and silver at even that low amount. They have ways to break it down in terms of goldbacks and other fractional parts of gold and silver, fractional ounces. But you can go up to pretty much any level, and you can buy gold or silver, physical gold or silver that is out of somebody else's hands, something that you control, something that is not an ETF or a derivative or something like that. And that is really what you need to do to try to protect your wealth in these uncertain times. So it appears that they were trying to strike Prince Sultan Air Base, which is no longer allied with the United States. Al Jazeera confirmed that Iran executed a retaliatory strike on Kuwait's power and desalination plants. They said half of Kuwait's water supply is completely gone. This is the terrifying reality of Trump's disastrous war, said one account on X. And when we look at the consequences of all this, we have many people saying, well, don't worry, this is just, there's nothing to panic about. We've got people in Kuwait who are desperate to get out.
My understanding
This is the wrong one here. Sorry, that's the wrong clip. I wanted to show, it looks like we don't have that clip in here, but yeah, you got a lot. The airport in Kuwait is just a sea of people trying to get out. And as Glenn Greenwald said, tell them don't worry. Trump said months ago that Iran had no radar, no communications, basically no missiles and missile launchers left. So what's the panic? Just go home and relax. Trump destroyed Iran back in March, didn't he? Unprecedented crowds at the Kuwaiti airport for departure from the country. Yeah, Iran's missiles and its military have been destroyed, right? Well, no, actually. We can see over and over again that you don't even have to do any fact-checking. I mean, who needs fact-checkers when you can see what's happening in real time? As these guys are boasting about how they have destroyed Iran's military capability, the military capability is raining death on various places as they speak. So Iran said, we're going to get even closer, making more chilling Trump death threats. And again, it is crossing a red line, is it? Was it crossing a red line when we assassinated their leaders and their leaders' families? Shocking video that was entitled, Where to Kill Trump, was released by Iranian state media, claiming to know where the leader's motorcade route and the vulnerabilities within his security. Now, this is coming from The Express, the UK. And again, when we see the picture, I think they've got a picture in this article and the next one, Travis, of the giant mural that they put up on a building. There they are drowning in a sea of red ribbons, I guess that's supposed to symbolize blood. Based on the most complex security protocols between 2024 and 2026, Trump's routine movements in the U.S. have been gathered and decoded, said the video clip. It claims to reveal Trump's transportation from his airport to his residence at Mar-a-Lago, saying there's a point on this route which is very suitable location for the free people of the world. And so the Express calls it a disgusting clip, and they continue to refer to all of this as outrageous. And yes, it is. I don't think we should be involved in assassinations. But why is it that it's not disgusting and outrageous when Trump actually does an assassination of other people? This is what I don't understand. I do think assassinations are outrageous. And I think that those kinds of chickens come home to roost. And we're about to see that. And perhaps it won't just be the leaders who get hit it'll be a lot of Americans who get killed as well. Just a week ago, Tehran held the state funeral of the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Supporters could be seen chanting chilling calls to kill Trump and death to America. They've been shouting death to America since they overthrew the Shah that we put in. They have not acted on it, nevertheless. They may. But again, chilling calls, a terrifying peace. This is the way they characterize it. But it's not a problem when we do that. And again, it's the article, Travis, Trump family shown with coffins on chilling Iranian billboard. A mural in Tehran depicts the deaths of the U.S. first family as the Middle East war escalates. And again, it's flag-draped coffins are shown on the columns there. Can you pull that up and show that to people there? I don't have that in the deck. The mural carries the slogan, blood for blood. In another display, Trump lying in an open black coffin, his eyes closed and his hair disheveled. Well, at least they left it on, right? The latest image appears to show the president's 5 children, along with Trump and his wife, apparently a response to the effect the wars had on the family of the late supreme leader, who was killed with U.S. and Israeli strikes that also killed his daughter, his son-in-law, his daughter-in-law, and his infant granddaughter. But that was them. I mean, we operate with a different standard. It's not chilling or terrifying when we do that kind of thing. It's only chilling and terrifying when somebody threatens to respond in kind. A former U.S. military advisor admits that Trump's disastrous war has completely destroyed global trade. So before the war, 100 ships passed the Strait daily. Actually, the numbers that I've seen were 130 to 140 on average per day. Now less than 16 sneak through in sheer terror. And that is higher than most of the reports that I've seen as well. Less than 10 sneak through at this point. 16 was an average when they had their MOU. But when you look at this, it's not just Trump's disastrous Iranian war, but it's his disastrous trade war. Look at how he has thrown a monkey wrench into supply chains, both in 2020 and then again, first thing he did when he came back in 2025. He picked up where he left off, throwing wrenches into the machinery of supplies and manufacturing. And it's not for the good of Americans. If we can't get, as manufacturers, can't get a good price on supplies, if we can't do business because of government regulations on our throat, that's the real issue. Again, he's taken the tips from his globalist masters to do everything they can to destroy the economy. And this is clearly providing the path for the fourth turning. You look at the fourth turnings that we've had in the past. And again, this goes back to Strauss and how the people who coined the term millennial, and they talked about a generational view of history, they found that about every 4 generations, about every 80 years, each generation being about 20 years old, they went back 500 years in U.S. and British history because we were synchronized. Now the entire world is synchronized. And they pointed out that about every 4th generation, you go through, and they talked about how the first generation after a war was very much, after one fourth turning, was very much like the first generation after the war and the previous fourth turning. Said usually, always it involves some massive economic unrest and usually a war. And so our previous fourth turnings have been the American Revolution, the Civil War, World War II, and the Great Depression. And we've seen that in our second and third fourth turnings, we lost a lot of freedom and had a major consolidation of government. That's what this is truly about. I think this is paving the way for a dystopian technocratic surveillance state. Now, that's what Zbigniew Brzezinski was writing about back in the 1970s. He said, we're between 2 ages. And the coming age, the technocratic age, he called it, we'll know what you're going to do before you do it. It's going to be the application of technology for tyranny. And that's exactly what they are operating on. Iran successfully struck massive U.S. military hubs in Kuwait and Jordan. And so the oil traders are saying exactly what this military official said. We burned through all of the buffers for the oil trade. Financial Times spoke with energy traders at the end of the week who warned that slowing tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz could trigger a more severe supply crunch than the first round of the U.S.-Iran war because emergency reserves and stockpiles around the world that cushioned the earlier disruption have mostly been depleted. We have burned through all the buffers that we had. Everything, said one trader. Ultimately, the market was pricing an optimistic flow trajectory that is now clearly not on the table. That's right. And again, when we look at the stock market to me is just, as Alan Greenspan said, irrationally exuberant. And this is what you typically see in the psychology of economies. Right now, they are irrationally exuberant and optimistic. At some point in time, that will change. And then they'll become so irrationally pessimistic that it'll be hard to do anything. Meanwhile, the U.S. has sent dozens more refueling planes to Israel amid widening Iran war as the price of oil climbs. That's another aspect of this. Think about how much oil, how much energy is burned in the war effort, right? They're not just cutting off the supply of oil, but they themselves are burning the fuel at a very rapid rate. Trump sends dozens more refueling planes in the sign of a widening war. And don't underestimate how much of the fuel this really does burn. It's a tremendous waste of energy, fuel, money, and lives. Trump is considering a massive offensive in Iran that will be wider in scope than the current strikes around the Strait of Hormuz. Again, no declaration of war. They said they ended it, but you had the Zionists like Mark Levin screaming, I'm a constitutionalist. You've got to have a Congress to stop this war. No, it's exactly the opposite of what the Constitution says. The Constitution says that you can't start it without Congress. Once it is declared, the president can unilaterally end it because he's now the one who's managing it. But it was illegitimate from the start. And Mark Levin lying about the Constitution as usual. This guy has pushed a constitutional convention because he doesn't like our Constitution and he would like to rewrite it. That's what it's really about. Don't get fooled by his book, The Liberty Amendments. It's not about liberty at all. It's about putting us in chains. Who's going to write that Constitution? The people in Washington now. The people who won't obey the good Constitution that was written by the founders of this country. So you're going to have them write a replacement Constitution? No. And oh, by the way, the Constitution doesn't have any 60-day window. So you need to either change it or obey it or get out. But of course, nobody's going to throw him out, not the GOP while they're there. Iran has warned of more crushing retaliation on Friday. By all accounts, the current wave goes beyond prior strikes in size and scope. Iranian state media has reported that 8 people were killed from the overnight strikes. Several bridges had been attacked overnight as well. And so again, we look at it and it is a tragedy that 4 lives will be lost. I think there's a lot more, and no telling how many soldiers have been severely injured, perhaps life-altering in terms of losing limbs and other things like that. Does that matter? No, they keep that on the QT. Don't want to talk about that because that's how we measure victory, of course. There isn't any objective that's been put out there. And so what we look at is the number of casualties of ours versus their number of casualties, the number of bombs that we drop versus the number of bombs that they drop. That has never worked. It didn't work in Vietnam. It didn't work in Korea. Never worked. So this comes after Trump's prior warnings to go after key civilian infrastructure. Again, he's literally a war criminal. Iranian media reported 5 bridges were hit in the latest round of U.S. strikes, as well as a train station and an airport. Israel is warned of infrastructure for infrastructure, tit for tat. Kuwait says one of the country's power and water, as I pointed out before, severe damage, supposedly half of their water supply being taken out. There was also an attack on the Qatar base, not just Jordan, not just Kuwait, but also Qatar and also Saudi Arabia. Think about this. This is what Trump is accomplishing for Israel. That's what they want. They destroyed a long-range radar system and several U.S. aerial refueling aircraft in the Qatar base. And then the U.S. has attacked an Iranian control tower. There were pictures posted by Hegseth boasting about its destruction. Again, this is, when we look at this is the hallmark of a terrorist, boasting about killing civilians and destroying infrastructure. Crossing a red line, attacking people and civilian infrastructure will have a very severe and miserable price, said the Iranian news agency. And again, everybody's got their red lines that are being crossed. As you got Senator Mark Warner saying on Sunday, he said, surprising and remarkable in many ways that there aren't more dead U.S. troops in the Iran war. He said, we have hundreds that are seriously wounded. Have you seen any talk about that in the media? I haven't seen any talk about the number of casualties that we had. They do talk about fatalities. Supposedly, there's only 16 fatalities, but hundreds of people seriously wounded. And for what, you might ask? For Israel. I would argue, Margaret, said Warner, that this is what happens when you start a war of choice. When you start a war of choice without a plan. And that is exactly what has happened. The war will hit the 5-month mark this week. And so, they said, we hate to see what will happen, said Trump. They were in the service of our country. Were they, or were they in the service of another country? He said, they will fight to the death, but never allow Iran to have nuclear weapons. Oh, he's back to that old canard, is he? It was Trump himself who said, well, we could go in and get the dust, but it would just be a PR event. Actually, we don't need to go in and get the dust. So what is this about then? You know, was he lying to us when he told us that he had destroyed all the Iranian nuclear facilities? Or is he lying to us when he says that it's still a threat? I think both of those were lies. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we will be right back. Stay with us.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Well, welcome back. When we look at the other war that is going on with Russia and Ukraine, we just had a major breach between Ukraine and Poland. Poland is outraged at what Zelensky has done in terms of honoring an organization that was responsible for what Poland considers to be a genocide. Yeah, this is the Heroes of the Ukrainian Insurgent Army. That's what they label them, Special Forces Unit. And in May, he issued a decree naming the elite Special Forces heroes. Poland officially classifies their actions during World War II in Volhynia as a genocide in which approximately 100,000 ethnic Poles were murdered, and Polish President Nawrocki condemned Zelensky's move as the glorification of bandits and killers. You know, we're supposed to believe that genocide is something that only happened to Jews and only happened in World War II. Actually, the term genocide was coined by a Jewish researcher when he was talking about what the Turks had done to the Armenians. And it happens all the time. It's just when you want the land of a group of people and you decide that you're going to kill every last one of them and or run them out. And that's what we have seen over and over again. And it's continued between Turkey and Armenia. and Nagorno-Karabakh. We have seen that continuing up until recent times. They still are coming after the Armenians. And they're doing exactly the same thing to the Armenians that the Israelis are doing to the people in Gaza. Exactly the same thing. Attacking civilians and saying, well, if you stay here, you're going to die. You better get out and give me the land and what is here. But tone-deaf Zelensky said, many Ukrainians view the UPA as heroes who fought for independence against both the Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, but Poland emphasizes their responsibility for the systematic extermination of Polish civilians, including women and children. The tension was further exacerbated by the recent state reburial of a UPA leader who collaborated with the Third Reich, demonstrating a state-level veneration of figures who were responsible for war crimes. And this is the interesting thing about what's happening in Ukraine. Again, the Ukrainian area has a tremendous number of Jews in it. Zelensky is Jewish himself. And there were a massive number of Jews that were killed in the Ukraine by these neo-Nazi groups, which he's now aligned with. He's now aligned with them. And that has been a recurring line of rhetorical attacks from Russia, calling them Nazis because they have aligned with these people. And people say, well, what is it? Why would Zelensky do that when they've got memorials set up to the Jewish people who were killed by the Nazis, and now he is honoring these groups and allied with their descendants and all of this stuff? Well, it's a familiar pattern, isn't it? We have always seen the danger is that you become the monster that you fight. And that really is what has happened to Zelensky, Jewish Zelensky in Ukraine, as well as to Israel itself. And many Jews have come from the Ukrainian area, the Ashkenazi. You have Netanyahu. So many famous actors in America have come from Ukrainian Jews. It truly is amazing how many of them have migrated. Of course, a lot from Russia, but even more from Ukraine. International and domestic repercussions have been swift and significant. Zelensky has defended the right of Ukrainians to choose their own heroes. Yeah, if we like Nazis, we can honor them. It's kind of like the same thing the Democrats are doing with this guy up in Maine. He's got a Nazi tattoo and everything. Well, that's okay. He's a Democrat. We're fine with that. We've even had a Democrat Socialist of America, DSA person, went on a podcast and said, well, I really don't care if they're closet Nazis as long as they put in our communist agenda. See, the idea between distinction between communism and fascism of the Nazis really is just a kind of a debating point. It's which direction do you approach totalitarianism? Is it done from a universal brotherhood of man, which the communists quote, or is it done based on a master race, which is the way the Nazis came after it? It doesn't really matter. I mean, and there's a fine difference between the communists taking over the means of production and owning them, or the fascist technique of saying we're going to control these different means of production. We're going to control these companies. We're going to take a controlling interest in it with the government. And oh, by the way, as government officials, you will also pay us for that. That's the approach that Trump is taking here domestically with American corporations. It's more fascism, and it really is kind of the model that the Chinese Communist Party has taken. They still call themselves communists, but they operate as economic fascists. And of course, they are also highly nationalistic as well. So again, they have a right to choose their own heroes. And so we can honor genocidal Nazis if we want to. It's none of your business, is what he's saying to everybody. So he has promised that he will open the security archives regarding the Volnya massacres in an effort to de-escalate the dispute. Oh, it's kind of like showing us the Epstein files, right? You think that's really going to happen? I have my doubts as to whether that's going to happen or not. As a matter of fact, when we look at what is happening in terms of Israel, Ben-Gvir is back in the news again. This is a guy who, he's cut from the same cloth as Pete Hegseth. He just can't help but gloating in torture and lethality and murder. He's doing it again, and he is also in charge of the prisons. And it was just last week that I read you an op-ed piece from World Magazine where they were outraged that the New York Times would report about some of the atrocities that have happened in the prison system under Ben-Gvir. It's not that the New York Times is the only one saying this. Everybody has been talking about this for quite some time, including Ben-Gvir. He publicly boasts about what he's doing to torture prisoners and to execute them. He's even got a little pen that looks like a hangman's noose. So he's got a proposal now, which is really more PR stunt than anything else. He wants to build a detention facility for Palestinians surrounded by crocodiles. The funny thing is that the pushback that he gets, a little bit of pushback that he gets, is coming from like an animal rights group. They're worried about the crocodiles.
Won't somebody think of the poor crocodiles?
Yeah, that's right. They're not worried about the people, right? Because, again, from their perspective, everyone is subhuman compared to the chosen people. If you're their enemy, you're worse than subhuman. You're sub-crocodile level. So this is something that Professor Finkelstein has said, the problem that is happening in Israel is actually bigger than what you see happening in just one area. The deck seems to not have the new videos for today for some reason. I'm not sure that's there. Okay. We will, we'll just leave that at this point in time. We won't play what he has to say. I think all the videos are incorrect in the deck today for some reason, Travis. I'm not sure if they didn't get put in last night. Okay. So again, he was pointing out that if you look at the vast majority of Jews in Israel, they're fine with what Netanyahu is doing. As a matter of fact, they want it harder. They don't think he's hardcore enough. And yet, when you look at what Jews in America say, for instance, like Finkelstein and many others, many of them voted even for Imam Dani as a protest against what Israel was doing. So the American Jews will deny that that's really what's happening, or they'll vote against it or whatever, or denounce it. But it really is happening. And when you look at, I've got another clip that we don't have on the board here, which is the Zionist anti-Semitism. And we've seen this over and over again as well. You have the ultra-Orthodox who are protesting the Israeli government. They've said over and over again, well, we think that God gave us the land and he will give us the land, but God will do it. We don't need to kill and steal in order to do this. That's a violation of the Ten Commandments. And when they say that type of thing, when they refuse to participate, they get attacked by the police and the military in Israel. So the Zionists are actually some of the worst anti-Semites anywhere. They attack them. It's a worse attack than you've seen at any of these protests or riots in America. Ben-Gvir proposed building a prison encircled by crocodiles. He said he got the idea from Alligator Alcatraz in Florida, which again was another idiotic and sadistic PR stunt. It was officials at their Parks Authority argued the crocodiles should only be kept for education and research. They were treated as an endangered species previous to this. But the prison system argued its staff could handle crocodiles because of their experience working with attack dogs. So I guess we're going to see the crocodiles used like attack dogs to bite prisoners.
Don't worry, this is just my emotional support crocodile. He's very well trained. I can handle him.
That's right.
Just don't make any quick movements or breathe too loudly or blink too quickly.
Yeah, just don't get anywhere near the water, or they'll put you in a death roll and take you down to the bottom. Ben-Gvir celebrated the decision on Facebook on Thursday, posting an AI-generated image of himself holding a crocodile on a lead. There you go. He said, terrorists thinking of trying to escape, think again. Since what many people allege, and I say it is, genocide in Gaza began in October 2023, Ben-Gvir has overseen a sharp deterioration in conditions for Palestinians held in Israeli prisons. Torture, starvation, and degradation. Human rights organizations have accused Israel of widespread abuse, have described some detention facilities as torture camps. Well, yes. As a matter of fact, the stuff that World Magazine was so upset about, the New York Times talked about, they said, look at this. They put out this thing talking about torture and rape in the Israeli prisons. How dare them talk about that? Well, everybody's been talking about that for months. They did that just the day before Israel put out their report talking about how bad Hamas was. So this is clearly something to push back against the Israeli government. Look, both Hamas as well as the Israeli government are horrific. There's not a good guy in this fight. We should understand that. And we should not pick a side, one side or the other. And even went to the extent of saying, I mean, who is this writer? He says he's a Christian, but he denies the virgin birth and the resurrection of Christ and his role as a Messiah. It's like, oh, okay. Well, do that with your Israeli leaders that you are cheering and making excuses for as they commit genocide and then create torture camps as well. They don't even profess Christ. They protest Christ as much as they can. So this is what the Parks group said, Israel's Nature and Parks Authority. Crocodiles are sentient beings with complex needs for space and water. Would they ever say that about a Palestinian? No. Would they say that about non-Jews? No, absolutely would not. Nile crocodiles have been a protected species in Israel since 2013. Last year, the Israeli military killed more than 250 Nile crocodiles. There you go. They protect them as well as they protect the Gaza children, don't they? At a farm, an Israeli settlement in the West Bank. What this reminds me of is when I covered the Bundy Ranch, they had the desert tortoise as justification for running all of the ranchers off of the land they've been on for probably 150, 160 years, well before the BLM was even created. That is the Bureau of Land Management. They're managing to run all the farmers off, saying that it protected the desert tortoise to get the farmers off. And yet the reality is that the desert tortoise had thrived because of the additional water that was brought on the scene. These guys had property rights that included water rights and the rights to these water features, which the BLM went in and started destroying those things. They put the water in there for the cattle, and then the desert tortoise were able to get more moisture from the feces of the cattle and things like that, so they actually thrived there. The BLM had set up a desert tortoise refuge to try to help them to breed, and they wound up, while all that stuff was happening, they wound up euthanizing hundreds of these desert tortoise that were protected species, just like this. This is what governments do. This is why you don't want to have them protecting the environment or protecting species. Governments are typically the worst polluters that you can have anywhere, certainly the case in China and in many cases in the US
let's
as well.
not forget what the plan was for that land. They were going to sell it off to China.
Yeah.
That's what they wanted to do. And we all know how much China cares about the indigenous species.
That's right.
They're so careful and protective of animals.
That's right.
That's why they kill and eat anything they can find.
Absolutely true.
We've been to China. I've seen the wet markets. We saw the dogs they were raising for food. This is not a joke. They do this stuff.
They eat the lips of fish and the feet of chicken. I mean, that was literally
on the menu. They had seahorse soup. I've never looked at a seahorse and thought, man, there's some good eating there. That looks delicious. This is born out of a desperate need to feed your population. China eats everything because they have a massive, massive population base and have for most of recorded history. They have more people than they can feed.
And they had a great leap forward where Mao showed his power by starving his own people. Yeah, that's really where that is all coming from. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, you have the Israelis have flattened the Red Cross Center in Lebanon. So that is a standard, that is par for the course. More of an unjust war, more war crimes, more terrorism when you focus on destroying hospitals and Red Cross centers. Well, we're going to take a quick break, folks, at the top of the hour, and we will be right back. Stay with us.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
And the passing of Sam Neill, an actor that everybody knows from many different, so it's mostly Jurassic Park is what most people touch base with him, but he's been in a lot of things. And I've seen so many things that have come across on social media. He was someone who seemed to be very much at peace with himself and trying to live a peaceful life. Listen to him talking about his dream.
Do I have a dream? I think I'd like a night where there's no dreams. I'd like a morning when I wake up and there's really nothing on the news. And everything just returns to dull. And there's nothing to report. And there's no pestilence. And there's no war and there's no aggression and people are just leaving it alone and getting on with each other. Wouldn't that be nice? The surf is 3 foot high today. Chickens are laying in Central Otago, New Zealand. The football will be played as usual on Saturday. Someone might win, but probably everyone will just have a draw. There's nothing happening. That's my dream. Let's just be nice.
That's funny.
I think we could all relate to having that dream a little bit.
Yep. Nothing in the news, no situation of war, aggression, people trying to control us, people trying to kill us. Unfortunately, that's not the real world. Back to the real world, away from Sam's dream here. We have a congressman screws over America to fight for Israel. Is this even news? I guess another day, another one of these stories. Alex Brusewitz, one of Trump's most effective outside political operators, says Revolver News, and they would know because they're big Trump fans, brought up the topic of a possible Israeli-based foreign influence campaign on social media. Possible? Are you kidding me? As I reported last week, they used to have a PR fund of about $7 million. They ramped it up to, I think it's over $700 million. It's over 100 times bigger now because of what they've been doing with the genocide for the past 2 years. And where have they focused this? It's all been focused on social media. And so when he said that, and oh, by the way, Alex Brusewitz is Jewish himself. He's talking about this is not anti-Semitism. And there's a lot of American Jews who are very upset about the fact that the Israeli government is trying to conflate all Jews with their government. So if you oppose their government, which even a majority of Israelis don't support, if you oppose that government, then you are racist against all Jews. Well, nothing could be further from the truth, and it is just a tactic. But the statement from Alex Brusewitz triggered a full-blown meltdown from Randy Fine and Mark Levin, two people who I have given Jonathan Pollard Awards to in the past. They are American traitors for Israel. Mark Levin, Randy Fine, they deserve the Jonathan Pollard Award.
There's also the fact, like, there is another country that they seem to love more that they could go to.
That's right.
If Mark Levin loves Israel so much, he could move there, and they might even accept him into the military. But
right.
No, he doesn't want to fight in the military. He wants to send Americans to fight and die for Israel because he hates
true
Americans.
Of Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro is young enough to fight, absolutely. But no, they're here as agents.
Maybe we could all sign a petition to get Israel to allow Mark Levin into the military. We know he's a bit old, he's a bit loud, but could you guys make an exception? He really wants to fight for you guys.
Well, don't they have a position for armchair general? I mean, he could be the armchair general commanding the forces. Scream at him. Yeah. Go over there. Go die for me.
He's so loud and shrill, they'd be able to hear him without any amplification. He could just be standing somewhere and yelling orders.
Well, this is what Randy Fine is doing. He is a Republican congressman from Florida. He's reportedly threatening to vote against every single House rule until Trump fires this guy, Alex, all because he asked a simple question. So again, this Republican congressman, I would say that Randy Fine is not a Republican congressman. He is an Israeli congressman. He is willing to jam up Trump's entire agenda, weaken a razor-thin House majority, and punish the American people because an American First operative asked a totally legit question about foreign influence. And again, this is from Revolver. Revolver revolves around the Republican Party. Revolver revolves around Donald Trump. So they're very upset about this. But this is really what helped to put him in office. He thinks that asking any legitimate questions about what Israel does is anti-Semitism. So on Tuesday, Fine was the only Republican to vote against the rule laying out how the House will proceed on certain bills this week. Two sources familiar with the matter relayed that Fine told the White House that he plans to vote against every rule until Trump fires Brusiewicz. Again, Randy Fine is more than Israel first. Randy Fine is Israel only. He doesn't even care about the GOP that he's in, let alone America. So again, it's when we look at the Zionists, and there's people like Randy Fine, understand that there are Jews, there are Zionists, and there are revisionist Zionists. The revisionist Zionists are like radical Islamic terrorists, the jihadis. And they don't want to have any peaceful co-option of anything. They want to attack first and kill everybody and take what they've got. That's really what revisionist Zionism is all about. That's the strain of Zionism that Netanyahu inherited from his family. Meanwhile, a Trump campaign manager ran online campaign to deep six the memorandum of understanding with Iran. They did not want that peace agreement, and it's very clear from the Israeli influencers like Mark Levin. And so this is Brad Parscale, who ran Trump's media campaign, his online campaign, and he was also running a campaign and highly paid by Israel. You know, Randy Fine says it's outrageous that anybody would say that that Israel is influencing our elections or social media, and yet they have paid. They got a budget of over $700 million, and this guy alone is getting, I think it's $1.5 million a month to influence for Israel. This is Brad Parscale. Trump's former campaign manager is now an Israeli agent whom the Israelis pay big money to run a campaign against the U.S. peace pact with Iran, reports The New American. Time magazine reported that Brad Parscale's consultancy was behind an influence campaign to wreck the Memorandum of Understanding that would end the unconstitutional Iran war. And it is unconstitutional. More importantly, it is immoral and unjustified. So again, it's this is the same guy who took over the Charlie Kirk organization. He's also in control of Salem Radio. You may know Salem Radio. It is the biggest network of Christian broadcasting that is out there. And it's now run by an Israeli operative. He is a registered foreign agent of the State of Israel. As the New America's Veronica Korelniako reported last month, Parscale is a foreign agent. What many people think is a euphemism for a spy, I would say so. He took control of the Charlie Kirk show after Charlie Kirk was killed, and he is now generating 100 original pieces of content each month, with at least 80% aimed at Gen Z audiences across TikTok. And Parscale has also pledged to amplify his campaign across social media and through integration of narrative messaging into Salem Media Network properties and aligned distribution channels, which he's also taken control of. So he's taking control of the Charlie Kirk program as well as the biggest Christian broadcasting media network, Salem. He serves as Chief Strategy Officer of Salem, as well as he influences how AI tools like OpenAI, ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, and Google's Gemini characterize Israel and the war. So you understand that artificial intelligence, and I saw this from the very beginning in its infancy when they first came out, first iteration of ChatGPT, I asked it some questions about vaccines. I asked it some questions about climate change and the pandemic. And it's like, this is controlled. They programmed this thing to give these answers. It's not objective whatsoever. And now it is programmed to give you the appropriate answers for Israel and its war that it has drug us into. Israel agreed to pay his company, Clock Tower X, $1.5 million per month. And yet it is a blood libel, says Randy Fine, if somebody were to point out that this is happening, when it actually is happening with Brad Parscale in a big way. So the Israeli government seeks to conflate anti-Semitism with criticism of the Israeli government. All this campaign was framed as an effort to combat rising anti-Semitism online. It's actually rising criticism of the Israeli government. And the Israelis, Time reported, aren't just a little disappointed with his effort to improve the rogue state's reputation. They're downright angry because it's not working. See, the problem is that when your crimes become such a global stench that everybody can smell it a mile away, it doesn't matter how much lipstick you put on that or how much you try to cover it with perfume. They paid Brad Parscale to try to spray perfume on their genocide.
One of the things that I find funny is that there are a couple of different types of Jews, and they seem to work at counterpoints to each other at times, where the secular, atheist, communist Jews they pushed the narrative and kind of killed church attendance. They're part of the reason for it, where the other types of Jews push their Zionist propaganda. So one type of Jew drives all the people out of the church. The next generation doesn't get the Zionist propaganda. Now they're dealing with the consequences of that because they've largely been educated in a communist hierarchical grievance type of way, where the Palestinians, they don't care about the true facts. What they see is that the Palestinians are more brown than the Jews are, and that's why they support Palestine. They don't care too much about who's in the right or wrong or the actual conflict going on.
And unfortunately, that's the way the Christians are, largely to the influence of a lot of these programs that you'll find on Salem Radio. They are misled with a theology that excuses the most unchristian-like behavior that God condemns. And even ultra-Orthodox Jews say, you're not following God when you kill for land. And that's exactly what they're doing. He was supposed to make things better, said one Israeli official, talking to Time magazine. We paid him lots of money. What did he do with it? Things have only gotten worse. Well, you might want to change your policies. How about trying that? We're talking about American influencers who are being paid by a foreign country. Then they're trying to build momentum to change the president's view or to view the view of others around him, said a senior U.S. intelligence official who spoke on condition of anonymity. He says it can't be dismissed as inconsequential by any means. Yeah, we're talking about controlling our country. And they're not even trying to hide it anymore. As a matter of fact, they're just going to merge the U.S. military and the intelligence agencies. And right now there was a majority who voted to do that, but they didn't have enough votes to get to 60. But this is going to come up a second time. Every Republican in the Senate voted to merge our military with Israel and to merge our intelligence agency with Israel. And every congressman in the House, every Republican congressman in the House voted to do that as well, except for Thomas Massie. And but it will be coming up again because that's one of the reasons why Thune changed his tune. So Senator Thune changed his tune, and he voted against it, and that was part of a procedural process to try to make sure that it comes up again. Here's that bill.
We are Americans. We are a sovereign nation. We don't take military orders from Israel. Resist like it's 1776. Tell your senators to oppose NDAA Section 219, U.S.-Israel Defense Technology Cooperation Initiative. Call your senators, 202-224-3121.
Yeah, the question is, how did they figure out that the Israelis were buying all this influence? Well, they kind of found out by accident. It was Nick Sortor who was looking at a social media campaign that's being conducted by the soft drink industry, trying to tell everybody how wonderful high fructose corn syrup is for you, right? It's wonderful. Just have more of that. And so it was kind of an orchestrated campaign. And like these orchestrated campaigns you see from the news, remember we've shown the videos in the past of Sinclair Broadcasting where they have all the local TV stations reading exactly the same thing. And they just cut in mid-sentence from one group to the other. They're all reading off of a script. Well, the same type of thing happens on social media. And these influencers are paid quite a bit of money to push various things, whether it is unhealthy soda pop or whether it's unhealthy wars. So there was an official in the Trump administration that noticed when Nick Sortor pointed out the pattern for this online soda pop campaign propaganda. He saw the same pattern, he said, in what was happening with Israel. He said similar language appearing across seemingly independent accounts in rapid succession. So in other words, they pay these influencers and they hand them a script. And these guys aren't smart enough to even put it in their own words. They just repeat it verbatim because that's what they're paid to do. He said, you got a person who's farming this out as an influencing task who's being paid by a foreign element to the social media space. He said, to me, this is a very, very dangerous thing. So his White House colleagues expected the conservative social media ecosystem to celebrate Trump's memorandum of understanding. Okay, they didn't like the war with Iran. So they thought, okay, we've got an MOU. That should make his base pretty happy. Instead, there was this massive social media campaign of influencers who were criticizing the MOU. No, we want war now. And where was that coming from? That was coming from Israel, and they paid for that. One shared an Israeli op-ed piece titled, "You could have been the greatest president of all, but you failed." So again, take a look at Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro as these influencers who are being paid. How much are they being paid by Israel, do you think? The claim that I'm coordinating an effort to prolong the war is completely false, said Brad Parscale. The only people manufacturing a conflict between Trump and Israel and me are anonymous officials using background quotes to make me the boogeyman. Yeah, this is a guy who is a registered foreign agent, and that foreign government is paying him $1.5 million to influence American public opinion. But he's not coordinating an effort to prolong the war, not at all. That only happens to be their number one issue. As the New American points out, Parscale is right. No one could possibly imagine that a foreign agent for Israel, which wants the U.S. at war with Iran, created an influence campaign to undermine the memorandum of understanding that would have ended the war with Iran. How ridiculous an idea, right? Well, it's not just social media influence. It's also the influence that flows through the pulpit. J.D. Hall has reported many times about the orchestrated campaigns and the tens of millions of dollars that are being paid to pastors, some of it in terms of, hey, here's a free trip to the Holy Land, and they wine and dine them, and they give them their spin on everything that's happening, and they send them back to push an aberrant theology that replaces the Lord Jesus Christ with the political state of Israel. That's really what they're pushing, folks. That's what the Christian Zionists are pushing. As J.D. Hall said, when I discovered that Israel had built a huge evangelical influence operation targeting American Christians, it didn't surprise me in the least. The Israeli state has always depended on Christians being on board, has always poured unspeakable sums of money into their public diplomacy, quote unquote, projects to keep American evangelicals squarely in their corner. And the latest example of this is Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson is very ill, but he took time off of his sickbed to complain about people who complained about the term Judeo-Christian. Oh, that's anti-Semitic, he said. And what he did was he doubled down on Wes Huff. Now, Wes Huff is a Canadian apologist. In other words, somebody who explains. He doesn't apologize in the sense of, I'm sorry. No, a Christian apologist is somebody who explains what the Christian faith is to people. He does a really good job of that in most areas. He came out with a kind of a weak take, I think, on Judeo-Christian and that term, and J.D. Hall called him out on it. But it was also Jordan Peterson who was outraged over this. Let me just say at the outset, when we talk about Judeo-Christian, and he points this out, he says, Christians don't really talk about Hebrew scriptures anymore when we talk about Greek scriptures, right? New Testament is written in Greek or Aramaic or whatever, but we don't characterize it by the language that it was in. That is something that really kind of came along by secular, non-Christian scholars in the same way that they changed BC, which meant before Christ, they changed that to BCE, before the Common Era. And so this is another one of these politically correct terms that has been put out there. When you look at what people are talking about in terms of Judeo-Christian, they'll typically say, and that's what he's saying is, well, we're talking about the Old Testament and the New Testament. That's the way Christians talk about it.
I also find it just ridiculous because they are still marking time between before and after the birth of Christ. What marks the Common Era?
Well,
what was the inciting event that caused everything to change? Why don't you explain that?
Yeah.
Could it be something important?
Yeah, the year of our Lord, 2026.
Anno Domini.
Yeah, the way we start out the program every day. But again, when you look at this term of Judeo-Christian, I get it. You know, people look at the Ten Commandments and, you know, that is a foundational aspect of our law, and we have plaques about that. But when we look at the Old Testament and the New Testament, think about it from a Christian perspective. Think about it from the perspective of the Lord Jesus Christ. What did he say? He said to the Jews of his day, he said, you search the scriptures. What scriptures? The Hebrew scriptures, right? You search the scriptures thinking that in them you have eternal life. But they testify of me. And that is really the way that we need to understand the Old and the New Testament. And when you look at people who deny the New Testament about Christ, and they deny that Christ is in the Old Testament, that he's testified in the Old Testament, it's because they reject or are ignorant of what the Old Testament is. And when you look at the Judaism, the rabbinical Judaism that we have today, it has nothing to do with Mosaic law. It's a complete rejection of that, especially when you look at the depravity of the state of Israel is a complete rejection of everything, the moral code and the rest of it that was delivered by Moses.
You're forgetting the 11th commandment. Surround thy enemies with a moat full of crocodiles. That way you may more easily abuse them.
That's right. Well, you know, when you look at it, right? Jesus said, you search the scriptures, but they testify of me. A good example of that, and I've played this on the show, is the outreach that a lot of Christians will do to Jewish people. And typically the most effective outreach, and this is something that's even done by John MacArthur when he went on with Ben Shapiro. He talks to him about Isaiah 53. And when you look at Isaiah 53, it's such a clear prophecy of a suffering Messiah that would redeem not just Israel, but all of humanity. And very specific things that line up with Jesus, so much so that when you read this to a Jewish person who basically doesn't pay any attention to what we call the Old Testament. They don't read the what they call the Tanakh. And so they're completely ignorant of what that's about. And you tell them that's about, you ask them, what's that about? Oh, that's your scripture, right? That's about Jesus. It's like, no, it's yours. So they're ignorant about it. And then when you show that to them, most of them will willfully reject it. It has been a very powerful tool to give the good news to many Jews about that. And some of them are open to that and will think about that. But many of them are just hardened against it. And I think that's one of the best examples of that, that they're either ignorant of the Old Testament entirely, or they willfully reject it because it points to Christ. When you reject Christ and when you reject the prophecies about him, the things that were fulfilled in him, like the Zionists do. For example, the Genesis 12 thing, when you look at what Mike Huckabee and Ted Cruz and other people of their ilk will do, you know, it says, "In you, all nations will be blessed. In you, Abraham, all nations will be blessed." Well, what do? They substitute for all nations, they substitute basically Israel. Because this is a prophecy about how the Lord Jesus Christ would bless all nations and what he did for them. But again, they make it about one ethnic group. They even make it about a political entity now.
I keep harping on this every time this comes up, but I just have to ask the Zionist Christians who believe this. Show me the blessings of supporting Israel. Point to them. Is it the dead soldiers? Is it the wounded and maimed soldiers?
Well, the blessings
where are
are
they?
not even in this life. The blessing is restoring our broken relationship with God. That's what Jesus came to restore.
But
That's
they
what
treat
Jesus
it as
came-
if it's a physical thing. Like we're going to be blessed in the here and the now, in the physical world,
That's right.
with wealth or status or something.
That's right. When you look at what the theology that Mike Huckabee and Ted Cruz are selling us, it's really like the prosperity gospel of Joel Osteen.
Except it's
Your best
even
life now.
It's one step removed from that, because at least Joel Osteen says, it's about God. God can do all these things for you. If you just have this nebulous faith in God, he'll do things for you. The Zionists say if you do things for Israel, it's one step even further removed than
Yeah.
Joel Osteen's theology.
Yeah. Whereas, oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes Benz? That's Janis Joplin anticipated people like Joel Osteen and Ted Cruz and Mike Huckabee, didn't she? But we don't even get the blessing of Mercedes Benz. Instead, we get a new war with somebody in the Middle East. That's the blessing that we get. So, when you turn your back on the prophecies about Christ, when you turn your back on the sacrifices for sin that actually didn't take away sin, but it looked forward to the actual sacrifice for sin that Christ would do on the cross, when you reject all of that and you turn your back on the Old Testament, then you eventually wind up turning your back on even the moral principles that are laid out in the Ten Commandments, for example. And that's what many of the ultra-Orthodox Jews have rightly criticized the state of Israel for doing. And so once you go down that path, that's where it ultimately ends up. Again, both of these testaments testify of Christ. Worshipping the state of Israel is like worshiping the bronze snake. Remember that episode, right? They're wandering in the wilderness and they're getting attacked as a punishment from God. They're getting attacked by poisonous serpents. And God had very clearly made it, he made it very clear that you're not to make any graven images. You're not to fashion anything. Even if you're going to build an altar, you don't shape the stones. You just grab the stones as you see them and stack them, right? And here he is telling them to make this bronze serpent on a pole. Well, Christ himself told us that that was a symbol of him, as he represented sin, the serpent, and he was put on the pole. And what did the people have to do? They just looked at that, looked at it in faith. And yet, what did the people of Israel wind up doing? They wound up worshiping this thing as an idol. And you'll see in the Old Testament later, they refer to it as the thing. They started worshiping this thing that was simply something that they looked forward to towards Christ. And that is what is happening really with all of the what is going on with this. So again, J.D. Hall is taking issue with what he had to say. He said, when he talked about Jordan Peterson, he said, there's only so far that you can go in terms of trying to understand God in terms of general revelation and logic. And he said, if you're going to reject special revelation, that is the book that God gave us, then all of a sudden you wind up in a turned back into the darkness because you can't actually see the light that is there. So we see Jordan Peterson saying things like, well, the Jews gave us this, the Jews gave us that. Jews gave us the Ten Commandments, the great stories of the Old Testament. It's like, no, God gave us the Ten Commandments, and God related those stories to us. They weren't just stories. They were things that actually happened. Well, we're at the bottom of the hour. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we will be right back. Stay with us.
Losing free speech to free minds. It's the David Knight Show.
Hello, it's me, Volodymyr Zelensky. I'm so tired of wearing these same t-shirts everywhere for years. You'd think with all the billions I've skimmed off America, I could dress better. And I could, if only David Knight would send me one of his beautiful gray MacGuffin hoodies or a new black t-shirt with the MacGuffin logo in blue. But he told me to get lost. Maybe one of you American suckers can buy me some at thedavidknightshow.com. You should be able to buy me several hundred. Those amazing sand-colored microphone hoodies are so beautiful. I'd wear something other than green military cosplay to my various galas and social events. If you want to save on shipping, just put it in the next package of bombs and missiles coming from the USA.
Well, I want to talk about what's going on with SIDS, with vaccines, and other information on that line, but I don't want to leave what I was talking about just yet. I want to read you the entire statement that Jordan Peterson, again, very ill, but he takes time to respond to this because, again, he works for Ben Shapiro. He said this, he said, with regard to the term Judeo-Christian, the Ten Commandments are Jewish. No, they're not. They're from God. The great stories of the Old Testament are Jewish. No, they're not. They're from God. They're a historical record of how God deals with people. And it was a picture of how he will deal with all of us, especially those in the church. The Jews developed the idea of subsidiarity as an alternative to tyranny and slavery. No, Jordan, God did that. You can't see any of this because you and your secular arrogance have rejected God and his word. He said, remember you proud, he puts it in air quotes, Christians, objecting in all your purity to the term Judeo-Christian. Remember that Christ himself was a Jew. No, Christ himself was Logos. He was the Word. He was the beginning, the end, the Alpha, the Omega. He was God himself. And you replace God with a Jew. That's what you've done when you say, well, Jesus was a Jew, and just dismiss it that way. God chose to reveal himself through a particular people. No question about that. And as Paul was a Jew himself, he said, so what is it, not all Israel is Israel. He said, so what is the advantage of the Jew? He says, well, many, the oracles of God came through Jerusalem. And God dealt with them, singled them out to use them as an example. But they are not God. Stop worshiping them and stop demanding that we worship them, because I never will. And this is one of the things that bothers me so much. It's not just the cruelty that we see. It's not just the genocide, the murder, the rape, the theft, the corruption that we see. It's not just them taking over our government and trying to destroy the First Amendment. It is the bigger issues, the things that don't belong to this life, the things that are eternal. That is what they are corrupting. But let's get back to what is happening right now in our lives, and that is this particular case about sudden infant death syndrome. Again, where are the Christians on this? When you talk about abortion, they finally got on that bandwagon, but it's very, very narrow. When they say they're pro-life, they don't want to look, many of them, at what's going on with the war, or they cheer it. They don't want to look at what's going on with the big pharmaceutical companies, or they cheer it because they watch Fox News. Valerie Ann Smith on X pointed out, when they gave the vaccine companies immunity, when Fauci did that with Reagan, they gave them immunity for anything that they did to kids. And think about that. It's only for kids that they get this immunity. This is one of the reasons why they were pushing the COVID-19 shot, the Trump shot, the genetic code injection. They were pushing it for children. Remember, at the very beginning of this, they said, kids aren't getting sick. It's only the elderly. We've got to get the shots to the elderly. They moved it for children and pushed to that because they wanted to get it into the childhood vaccine schedule. They do that, they get full immunity, not from a disease, but from any legal consequences for the damage that they cause to people. So in 1986, and this is an interesting point, think about it, there were only 3 vaccines. You had DTaP, you had MMR, and you had polio. Just those three, points out Valerie Ann Smith, were so harmful that the manufacturers faced bankruptcy because of vaccine injuries. With only 3 shots, they were looking at bankruptcy. So Fauci worked out a deal and got Reagan to sign it. The U.S. Congress, instead of forcing vaccine makers to make a safe product, chose to give full immunity to those 3 vaccines that were causing so much damage that it would have bankrupted Big Pharma. There are now 72 vaccines and 96 doses because they require many of them to be given multiple times. That's in just the childhood vaccine schedule. In the adult vaccine schedule, there are 13 vaccines and 24 doses. There's no liability. There's full legal immunity. Vaccine manufacturers have the right to make and inject you with hundreds of unsafe and toxic ingredients, like, and here's some examples: polysorbate 80, thimerosal, mercury, aluminum, formaldehyde, M59, squalene, acetone, sodium borate, and it goes on and on. This is a full page. And not only that, but also biological products and garbage. Fragments of animal organ DNA in vaccines. You have the maiden Derby canine kidney, female cocker spaniel Vero, African green monkey kidney, fetal rhesus monkey lung, Chinese hamster ovary, pork kidney, rabbit cornea, fall armyworm ovary. The vaccine industry is built on the use of aborted baby organs to produce the vaccines that we use today, and they have to replace these lines with more current abortion organs. The most recent harvested human organ for vaccine research is Walvax 2, which is a harvested lung from a 3-month-old unborn baby that was taken in 2015, harvested for research and for vaccine development. These are the code names, and I won't read them all, but they have a long list. We've all heard of HEK 293, the human embryo kidney, but there is a long, long list of these. That's not the only one. These are the code names for harvested organs used to make vaccines, their original sources, and what the vaccines that they used were. And when we look at this, remember during COVID, there was the whole thing was a psychological game. They war gamed this. They actually did double-blind testing of a psychological manipulation of people, gaslighting them. And so they had one group that would get the psychological gaslighting. This is a study that was done by an Ivy League school, and they ran that. It was released in July of 2020, talking about how they could convince people that, oh, you got to do this because if you don't, it'll be on you if somebody gets the COVID and dies. This is the way you love your neighbor. That's what they wanted the Christian pastors to sell people. And they ran it through the Christian pastors in the same way that the Zionists are using Christian pastors to gaslight people in many instances as well, paying them. And so they war gamed that. They had a double-blind study on that. And it just continues to go down this route of lies, gaslighting, and literal poisoning. Meanwhile, what is happening in Idaho, a 23-year-old mother who had her twins killed, I believe, by the vaccines. They died 8 days after getting the vaccines. They were immediately got sick after the vaccination. She took them to an emergency room. They diagnosed it as a vaccine issue. Her husband and his side of the family had had issues with vaccines, and they were sick until the day that they died, including one of them, which even the coroner says was still suffering from the vaccine issue. They say that they stopped breathing, and now they're accusing the mother of suffocating them. And it is punitive what they're doing. The judge has revoked bail for the mother that they've charged with murdering her twins. So it's not enough for these people to poison children, to kill babies. They now want to send the mothers who tried to save them to jail for life. They've set her bail was initially set at $2 million. But then the judge went back and said, no, she can't, she's ineligible for bail at any amount. She has a newborn child that was just born through cesarean section. and she's not allowed to breastfeed that child or to hold that child. This is over-the-top criminal. And just as more context, she and her husband had begun a lawsuit before these criminal charges were filed. She and her husband had started a lawsuit with the help of Children's Health Defense against the American Society of Pediatrics, or whatever they call themselves, the trade group of this guild, and charged them with racketeering because you can't sue the vaccine companies. They came after the pediatricians who are their bird dogs out there, shilling for them. And so after that happened, they came after her with a vengeance. She pled not guilty. She's consistently denied the allegations. She alleges that her twins' deaths were caused by the vaccines they got at a routine doctor's appointment just over a week before they died. The toddlers both had documented adverse reactions to the shot, documented at the hospital. The defense argued that Shaw has no criminal history, not even a parking ticket. She's remained in Idaho throughout the year as these people were doing an investigation. She has very strong family ties to the area, and she recently gave birth to a premature daughter who needs her mother. They argued that the bond is meant to ensure that a defendant will attend court. The bond is not intended to be used to punish them prior to them being found guilty. But that's the way that this judge and these prosecutors are using it. The defense also contended that the prosecution's case is entirely circumstantial. There is no confession. There's no eyewitness. There's no admission connecting Shaw to the children's death. By the way, there's no signs of a struggle or damage to their bodies either, except for the vaccine. The grand jury was not informed of these shortcomings in the state's allegations. The day after the twins received the vaccine, she took them to the emergency room. They were lethargic. Their lips had turned blue. The treating physician in the ER diagnosed them with, quote, post-immunization reaction. They remained ill in the days heading up to their death, 8 days after they got the shot. And she repeatedly sought medical advice according to court documents. But again, this is really, I believe, pediatricians racketeering with Big Pharma. The defense also submitted an affidavit from a registered nurse with 26 years of obstetrics experience. She contacted the family after she learned about the infant's death. She said she offered to help to obtain an independent forensic review, but she advised the family, she said, if this review uncovers evidence of abuse, I'll report that evidence to law enforcement. But she said the family immediately welcomed an independent examination. The nurse said she thinks that is inconsistent with what one would expect from someone who had intentionally harmed a child. Prosecutors acknowledged that the infants had suffered side effects from the vaccine, that at least one of them was still suffering reactions at the time of the death. But they say the only conceivable explanation, that's their term, the only conceivable explanation was that the twins were suffocated. Because we can never believe that Big Pharma would do things to harm kids, can we? Well, there was a landmark case in Britain.
It always blows my mind that people are more willing to accept the fact that a parent of the child, the person who gave birth to this child, who undoubtedly loves them more than any other person on this planet, is the one who would harm them.
That's right.
And there are monsters out there. There are monsters who do that sort of thing, but they're much fewer and further between than the type of monster that can assuage their conscience with a huge pile of money.
Yeah, there are monsters out there who make billions of dollars killing babies and everybody else out there. It's called Big Pharma. When a landmark case in Britain could mean for a mother charged in the Idaho twins' death. This was a situation of a woman who was charged with killing her children. She was given a life sentence in the UK. This is what I mean. It's not enough for these Faucian monsters to kill children. They then have to get life sentences for the parents in jail. Her name was Cannings, and she was sentenced to life in prison. But less than 2 years later, an appeals court overturned her conviction, ruling that the prosecutor should not proceed when reputable experts disagree about the cause of death and there's no other compelling evidence. So in this particular case, she had a long trail of tragedy due to SIDS, due to vaccines. And she lost 3 kids in a row to these vaccines. The ruling in her case continues to influence legal discussions more than 2 decades later because it established an enduring legal principle. When respected medical experts fundamentally disagree about the cause of a child's death, and there is no compelling independent evidence of homicide, just like in this case in Idaho, criminal convictions should not rest on disputed scientific opinion alone. It also shouldn't rest on the massive paid influence campaign called the Ask Your Doctor commercials and so forth, and the fact that they've completely bought the media. But unfortunately, it does, because that's why the people in the prosecutor's office in Idaho said, well, it's inconceivable that this could be from the vaccines. Couldn't possibly be that, could it? The Angela Canning's case taught us a hard lesson. Top medical experts can be wrong, and their opinion should never replace hard evidence. She was no stranger to grief. Long before she entered the courtroom, her first child died in 1989 at only 13 weeks old. Doctors concluded that she had died from SIDS. 2 years later, another baby died unexpectedly at 7 weeks. Then in 1999, her son Matthew died at 18 weeks. I wonder what the common thread was throughout all this. Could be the injections. Investigators questioned whether the 3 infant deaths in one household could truly be natural. No, they weren't. They were being poisoned by these injections. There was also no evidence to demonstrate smothering. There was no physical injuries to prove homicide. Instead, jurors were asked to weigh competing interpretations of medical science. The prosecution's most influential witness was a pediatrician, the former president of the British Pediatric Association. Again, another racketeering group, whose testimony in several high-profile infant death prosecutions would later become the focus of intense national criticism. So again, with all this happening, now they are coming after, as I mentioned at the top of the news, they're now coming after the Amish. Can't have the Amish out there as a control group, can we? Can't have them out there where people see, well, they don't have all these problems with autism and all the rest of stuff. They don't get vaccines. I wonder if there's any correlation between those two facts. You've got the Second Circuit Court upholding a New York vaccine mandate against the Amish. Now remember, back in 2019, and I was outraged at Trump when he did it in the spring of 2019. That was when he did that statement, which I've played a dozen times. Oh, they got to get the shot. They got to get the shot. It's really going around. Everybody's got to get the shot. That was in May of 2019. What was happening with that? Well, that was in an ultra-Orthodox community. They had several children get measles, and they blamed it on the fact that they had religious objections, just like the Amish did to this stuff. But when it came to the Amish, they hit them with massive fines. And this is something that is attacking both their religious convictions about the vaccines and even their homeschooling. And remember, the Amish were really pioneers in helping to establish the legal right, which we've always had. But they fought it in court and won the legal right to homeschool. The Second Circuit Court ruled that the state's elimination of religious exemption does not violate the First Amendment's protected rights of Amish parents in private schools. How can you ever say that the free exercise of religion can be infringed? That absolutely makes no sense at all. That is crystal clear. If ever there was anything clear, that is crystal clear in the Constitution. This decision imposes significant fines for noncompliance. And it comes from New York's 2019 repeal of religious exemptions during the measles outbreaks that happened really in the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, but now it is built up to $118,000 in fines against the Amish schools and parents. They argue that the mandatory vaccine conflicts with their faith's emphasis on separation from the modern world, reliance on divine providence, and their moral objections tied to vaccine development. In other words, the use of aborted fetal tissue. They also probably might consider it to be child abuse to inject aluminum and the remnants of all kinds of bodies of animals into their kids as well. They invoked a Supreme Court case of 1972 called Wisconsin versus Yoder. And that Wisconsin versus Yoder, I almost want to say Yoda, that was actually a unanimous Supreme Court decision that says that protected Amish educational autonomy, and it claimed that the school compulsory attendance in the government schools targeted their religious practice. But the Second Court ignored that precedent from the Supreme Court that was unanimous in 1972. They went with a more recent decision that came from 1990, saying the government generally does not provide religious exemptions from the law if the law is neutral and if it applies equally to everyone, even if it incidentally burdens religious practices. That's a nonsense decision, folks. There's absolutely no way that.
Well, just so long as the tyranny is equally distributed.
Yeah. Startled me there. That came in pretty loud. I jumped. Everybody. Let's take an example here. Let's say that the government says that everyone must sacrifice their firstborn to Moloch. Well, it's not a problem, says the Supreme Court. If everybody's got to do it, then we can. It's not a burden to your religious beliefs. That's what we're talking about here. That's how absurd this is. Everybody, you got to sacrifice your firstborn to the government or to Moloch or whatever. Well, we're making everybody do it, so it's not targeting you specifically. It doesn't have to be specific. And you don't ever have any exception in the First Amendment for religion, for exercise of religion, or for free speech either, by the way. And yet, that is what they're trying to pretend. The Amish plaintiffs are not seeking special treatment. They're just asking to be left alone, to live in private. Self-sufficient rural communities. They educate their kids in isolation. The 2019 exemption repeal occurred primarily because of an Orthodox Jewish community in Rockland County who is far away from the Amish community. But they're trying to establish a principle here. Greg Glasser, General Counsel for Physicians for Informed Consent, said informed consent and informed refusal are the bedrock of medical ethics. He said banning religious exemptions effectively legalizes medical bullying by proxy, forcing families to forfeit their children's education if they choose to exercise informed refusal. And so this is one of the worst examples of government overreach. But let's just go back to the pragmatic example of this and just talk about the safety of these things. There is in Japan, they have changed the minimum age for vaccination. You know, these are babies that are dying that are just weeks old because their bodies cannot handle the garbage, the chemicals that are injected as adjuvants, they call it. So in Japan, they're not allowing the kids to be vaccinated before the age of 2.
This actually happened in Japan. I think this is really interesting because you look at how these two countries behave towards vaccines and vaccine safety. In Japan, has done really some actions which are not followed by a lot of the other Western advanced health economies. But when they noticed this rash of deaths in the 70s, they saw what they did is they raised the age of vaccination to 2 years old. Guess what happened? When they did that, infant deaths disappeared. You know, so you have a country who noticed this signal, did something about it, and actually solved the problem. Neonatal mortality decreased.
Yeah, but we're not going to do that here, right? Well, we're nearly out of time. Before we run out of time, I want to thank the people who have supported us this month, and we are at 5/8. We're more than halfway through the month, and we're running a little bit behind, but I really wanted to thank those who really are our producers. This is what keeps the show going. It's your voluntary contributions. And if you would like to support the program, you can find all the different places where you can not only grab the program live or in archive format, both video and audio, but you can also find where you can support us. And you can find all that at davidknight.news. William W., Michael L., these are people who support us on Zelle. Christopher S., Gregory I., Lyndon H., Sally D., Susan L., Kevin M., Rose G., Mary Ellen Moore with Free Minds Films. I'll just put that in there because she's been on multiple times talking about that, so I don't have to try to keep her anonymous. Susan L. and Greg M., Jonathan M., Susan L. again, and Mitchell M. Also on Cash App, which you can also support us there. David W., Robert A., Samuel L., the Mad Head Doctor, Dylan L., Robert A., Richard S., and Dustin W. Thank you so much, all of you. And these are our producers, folks. These are the people who bring you the show on a regular basis. Well, as I said before, we're nearly out of time.
And we do have some comments here and tips that we have not gone over yet.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Stealth Patriot, appreciate that on Rumble. Thank you very much. Said, good morning. I'm thankful that every American knows how to spell dumb now. It's about damn time.
Damn spelled D-A-M.
Yeah. Okay. Epstein Island says, are Lindsey Graham and John McCain gazing up from Hades and saying, we're for Israel? That's the way he said. Real Jason Barker, Knights of the Storm. He says, you will eat the pugs and be happy.
That was when we were talking about China and their insistence on eating anything and everything that moves.
That's right. Yeah, they do. As a matter of fact, it's not pugs. When we were in China, they have a yellow dog, which kind of looks like the Doge dog, right?
Sort of similar to a Shiba.
Yeah, and we would see a bunch of those around, and they were all exactly the same age. And our guide said, yeah, they're raising them to eat. But that's one of those things. Star Barkley, thank you very much for the tip. Says, thank you, David. Of all alternative media, you, Travis, Lance, and Karen are the best. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Guard Goldsmith of Liberty Conspiracy says, it astounds me that Peterson can make such fundamental mistakes, but if one is not a believer, then one might think the people invented the Ten Commandments. And that is exactly the perspective that he's coming at it from. And that was J.D. Hall's point. He said, if you reject that this is a revelation from God, you will not be able to make any sense out of it. It's kind of like what Michael Glenn said, the physicist that I interviewed a couple of weeks ago. He was always proudly an atheist and a scientist, and he said, seeing is believing. And then he got to quantum physics, and he changed his mind. He said, believing is seeing. You have to have that, the appropriate point of view, or you really can't understand it, and Jordan Peterson, unfortunately, cannot understand that. He can get close, but he can't quite get there. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good day. Thank you. The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity, created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.
Don't hear